Welcome to the Radiate Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Christy Clemens Hoffman. Each week we will discuss tools, tips, and ways to radiate your best life ever, interviewing practitioners, authors, and luminaries to help you on your path. Wellness, joy, peace, abundance. What do you want to radiate? Hi, and welcome to the Radiate Wellness Podcast. I am here with our return guest, Stephanie Redfeather. Stephanie's got a lot of stuff really exciting that's coming up, and I know myself and the rest of the Radiate crew have been really excited for Stephanie. Tomorrow is your 50th birthday.
It is.
That's awesome. But we're really here to talk about Stephanie's new book, which is The Evolutionary Empath, which came out when?
On the 5th, last week.
Last week. So welcome, Stephanie. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. And you've just been recovering from a really nasty sinus infection.
I have, yes. So I might have to get a sip of tea here and there throughout the talk.
We've got tea, we've got water, we've got Kleenex, so we should be good. We're good. I've also been battling something, so I might start coughing. I'll try to
have a sympathy cough.
Exactly, sympathy cough. I love it. So the Evolutionary Empath. So this book has been a long time in the making, hasn't it?
I started it 3 years ago.
Wow. And I know when you came on the podcast last, you had you had a publishing date, you had the contract and everything, and you were working feverishly to get it done, which you did. Probably resulted in you being sick.
Yeah, I think there's a bigger thing happening, more than just an accumulation of stress. My guides have told me that this marks the completion of a massive initiatory cycle for myself, a huge period of training and preparation, and that my system just had to go offline for a little while to reboot.
Yeah, I was thinking Spirit saying, okay, you just go rest a while. We've got this, right?
Yeah.
Let us work on this.
I really had to trust. I had to reschedule a bunch of interviews, and I've got a podcast series that I'm in the middle of producing, and I had to push off the episodes I was going to work on, so I just had to go, okay, out of my hands.
Out of my hands. You do have a lot going on, and you really did this up right. So you hired a marketing consultant. You got your publisher's full support. That's what's wonderful about having a publisher, and they take care of many different aspects of it. And you've been just like going all guns getting this together. So let's talk about the book, The Evolutionary Empath. All right. Why that title?
Well, ask them, because this book went through several titles, because as I would work with the material, and let me just back up and say, my intention in writing this from the very beginning has always been to serve as a channel, as a portal, a conduit for whoever ends up with this book to receive an activation, to receive an awakening, to receive whatever coding Spirit intends for them, and for me to just be a vessel of that. So I would hold that conscious space every time I sat down to work on the book. And as I worked with the content and more content came through and higher level perspective got downloaded, the title changed 3 times because I was getting kind of higher vibrational information, higher level perspective. And as the material organized itself, the book broke into 2 parts. And the second part is more of the rubber meets the road, practical, how to deal with boundaries and what are they, and exercises for establishing boundaries, and your energy field and what that means, and activities, for clearing your energy field, and self-care, and all of these sorts of things that help us in the practical 3D world. But the first half of the book is really where the title comes from, The Evolutionary Empath, because I was given kind of a peek behind the curtain, if you will, that we are here on purpose, that the growing number of sensitive souls is not a fluke, it's not an accident, that we are here with the express purpose to help humanity evolve to the next level of consciousness.
Absolutely.
And that we're here because it's finally time. So I think in the last podcast, however many months ago that was,
Right.
I talked about this grand cycle of time, 24,000-year cycle called the Great Year.
Yeah.
So we are in the ascending phase once again. So humanity is raising in vibration, raising in consciousness enough. We have enough momentum. We're ready for it. For those of us with this refined energetic physiology and refined sensitivities are showing up, because we are the new human blueprint. We are what humanity is evolving toward. And I like to think that someday empath isn't even going to be a word. It's just going to be like the air we breathe. It's just going to be another way of saying human.
Right. Absolutely. I kind of feel like that's approaching very quickly, because I meet so many empaths and so many people are waking up to this empathic ability. I know a lot of your book revolves around the definition of an empath. And how do you define that for somebody, especially who doesn't know what that term means?
Yeah.
Right.
So the everyday sort of lingo or shorthand definition is just a highly sensitive person.
Right.
So the term empath, I think, has been in spiritual circles and conscious circles for a number of decades now. The only directive my guides gave me when I sat down to write this book was create a definition. And I was like, yeah, okay, sure, no pressure. All right.
Right, exactly.
But I wasn't aware that anybody had attempted to do that. And so I was like, okay, all right, let's see what, so it's just like, why me? But then, in the same breath, it's like, okay, I accept the mission.
Why not? Yes.
Yeah. And so I had been leading empath workshops for a number of years, and I had gathered this very long list of experiences that we tend to have, qualities that we tend to have. And I started there, and they started rearranging themselves into like items. And I realized that I have these 5 qualities, if you will, that everything aligned with.
Right.
And so the definition, I spend 2 chapters, if you will, defining what an empath is.
Right.
I do a very thorough job. Like, it's not just a section in a chapter and, hey, here's what an empath is. I go very deeply into the subject. And so there are multiple ways that I approach it. One, I talk about what an empath is not.
Right, very important.
So, for example, it's not a skill. Or something that we can turn on and off. It's not witchcraft. It's not, insert your favorite woo-woo word here. It's not that sort of thing. I believe that every human being is born with a capacity for empathy.
Right, which is different.
Same foundational word, but different. But not everybody was born an empath, because an empath is something you are 24/7.
Yeah.
Now you have skills within that set, however empath expresses through you, those qualities can be developed into skills. So I just wanted to speak to that since I mentioned the word skill before. And then I have the 5 qualities of an empath, which if you want, I'll go into those in a second.
Yes.
And kind of give the rest of the breadth of the definition. I list the 5 qualities of the empath and spend one entire chapter breaking those qualities down into what exactly that means. And I interviewed quite a few people, clients and students and peers. So I have real life anecdotes, examples from other people, which always helps. You can identify yourself in another person's story and go, oh my God, the same thing happened to me.
Right.
So, and then another piece that I bring into it is not something I've really heard other people talking about, which is being an empath is a decision we made at a soul level.
Sure.
As we were constructing this incarnation, if you will. Kind of, at the smorgasbord going, I'll take a scoop of that and a fillet of this and a pinch of that. And constructing what our life was going to be this time around. It's more than just personality traits.
Exactly.
Because what it carries with it is this cosmic mission.
Right. And it's life. It's our life. It's the way, it's not a thing we do or a thing we experience. It's a thing we are.
And so at the end of one of the chapters, I take all of that and condense it into a paragraph. My definition of an empath is a paragraph because that's just how long it needed to be.
Right,
So,
right.
Yeah.
And so you'll have to read the book
Yeah,
to find out what the definition is.
Yes, but the 5 qualities, I can explain those. So, so the first quality is we have an ability to merge with and absorb the energies and emotions and problems of other life forms. So we talk about people, but really it's, that's where it shows up the most.
Right.
But really anything that's sentient.
Right.
And that stems from our very open energy fields. And so that's why...
You have open energy fields.
Energy management and boundaries and all of that is so critical for empaths.
Critical, yes.
Yeah. The second quality is we have a highly sensitive nervous system. Highly tuned, very highly tuned. And so this makes us prone to overwhelm and overstimulation, and is why radical self-care is so fundamental for us. It's not, self-care is not a luxury for us. It is a daily must.
Yes.
The third quality is that we have an ability to perceive subtle energetic information from the energy fields of other life forms. And so these are the things that predispose us towards, having wicked intuition, seeing the dead, accessing the Akashic records, having premonitions, seeing the future, being able to astral travel, being able to journey to other dimensions, all of these
manifest, things. Synchronicities, all of that.
The fourth quality is the premium that we place on peace and harmony. We crave that calm balance, both within ourselves, in our relationships, in our homes. And so, I know for me, one of the ways this shows up is I'm constantly adjusting stuff in my house, tweaking, like really sensitive to the flow of energy, lighting, smell, sound, all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
And then the fifth quality is our huge hearts and desire to be of service.
Yes.
And if we're not careful, these are the qualities that cause us to overgive and put everybody else first and put ourselves last.
Absolutely. No, those are very important qualities. And I have to say, there are so many people in the world now who experience that and who express that. And your first point being about being able to get in the emotion and feel the emotions of all sentient beings, I feel like this is forests, animals, the planet, governments, that we feel all of it, even what's going on with the earth, right?
Yep.
So that's an excellent definition, because then, I think sometimes the word empath gets thrown around a lot. And so people will say, oh, I'm an empath, but they don't really, they've heard that and they think it just means somebody who's overly sensitive and who wants peace. But there's a lot more to it than that. There
is. And let me also just say, I acknowledge how much we love our cosmopolitan surveys. I had to resist that. Like, that wasn't true to who I was and my understanding of being an empath. If somebody put a gun to my head, I could probably create some sort of little questionnaire. And if you get 1 through 9, you're a mild empath, and if you get 10 through 19, you're a moderate empath. But I just, to me, these qualities all exist on a continuum.
Absolutely.
And not every person is going to express all 5. Some of them might peg all 5. Some of them might have repressed these qualities to the point that they don't even recognize them in themselves.
That's an excellent point. I think this is, because we can learn to embrace it. We can learn to shut these things down as well. No, I like that you bring that up, right? Because we don't, we can maybe have all these 5 qualities present, but maybe not all at one time, too. No, that's an excellent point. And then defining it, what it is and what it isn't, I think is a very good thing. And I know that there are lots and lots of books about being an empath out there. Dr. Judith Orloff, of course, is probably one of the best-known examples of that. And there are many other books as well. So what sets the And I haven't even held up the book yet.
Yeah, hold it up.
Isn't it beautiful?
It's my baby.
That is so awesome.
Seriously, if I know this may seem silly and as a first-time author, but this is my baby.
It is your baby.
And she has fledged and left the nest and is flying on her own.
And I love how you coordinated your outfit with the cover of your book. That is so fabulous. And so what is it that sets the evolutionary empath apart from like Dr. Orloff's stuff?
Yes. She's got some brilliant stuff. I don't know her personally.
Right.
But in skimming the book, I haven't read it, but I've looked at a fair amount of it. She comes from a different background.
Right. She, of course, being a psychologist.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
So she's got that perspective, which is very important. It's heavy on tools. It's a little more bite-sized pieces of things. I have a much more shamanic background, a much more, a background in just my own personal spiritual journey and consciousness. So I'm not at all saying that hers isn't spiritual. I bring in this bigger perspective, that first half of the book that I was talking about, of why are we here in the first place?
Yes.
The implications of being an empath at this point in human history, and just talking about how empaths couldn't even really have existed 100 years ago. We weren't at a point in our human consciousness and our level of consciousness and our vibration for empaths to really thrive with any success, even 100 years ago.
Oh, absolutely.
And we're still an anomaly in Western medicine and Western psychology and Western culture. And I talk about all of those things. So, I feel like one of the gifts I have is creating context and giving perspective. And so that's what sets this book apart, is if you get into the why am I here? Give me the bigger picture. Help me locate myself inside of my life and inside of human evolution, so I can connect more with my purpose and ground myself more fully in this body.
Because, after all, we're living a life and we have to live that life. And so it's, like I said before, being an empath is not something that we put on. It's not something that we are one day and we're not the other day. That, maybe it fluctuates. Maybe we're more of an empath one day and less than that. But anyway, my point of being is that the whole point of this is to live and to have this lifetime and focus on this lifetime with the tools that we can use. So I love how your book is practical. That it's not just like setting this thing up that you may be an empath right? So we have these 5 qualities, but then you give practical tips. You have meditations.
I do. I created 8 guided meditations.
That's a lot.
In the vision of the book, I'm like, this is going to be really cool. And then when it came time to do them, I'm like, this is a lot of work. It was like creating another book, if you will, because
that's a lot of meditations.
Yes, I actually produced them myself. I scripted them, recorded them, and produced them myself. But it's so much value added. Much value added, because one of the most important things I learned in my spiritual awakening is the experience, your own personal experience of a thing. And the experiential, the experiential experience. Sorry, I couldn't come up with a better word. But instead of taking in knowledge because you read it somewhere, taking in knowledge because somebody told you that's how a thing is. It's experiencing it for yourself.
Living it.
Feeling it in your body.
Yes.
Getting your own body felt sense of what is true and what isn't, because especially as empaths, I mean, we have got all the faculties to be really good BS detectors. We just turn a lot of that stuff off because it can be overwhelming.
It can be inconvenient too.
Yeah, and yes, excellent point. And so, being an empath carries just such an implication, and it's important that people find out the truth for themselves, find out their truth for themselves. And so a lot of these meditations are guided exercises where I take them through experiences with their body, take them through their own personal experience with the feminine and the masculine, so that they can download their own truth, their own experience, instead of just taking in something just because I wrote it in a book. Right. You know what I mean? I want them to get it in themselves.
And that's what I love about this and your approach with it. I've not worked with you personally, but I know a lot of people who have. And your approach with people is like, it's guiding them to have their own truth rather than teaching them something that they can integrate if they want to, but actually guiding them to integrate that in the moment. And you give such practical tools to do that. And so I have to ask, Stephanie, when did you realize that you were an empath?
I would say that coincided with my spiritual awakening in general. So I was an empath for the first 30 years of my life, didn't know it.
Had no idea what that was.
Yeah, had no idea what that was. I just went around thinking everything I felt was mine.
Right.
And being incredibly emotional and schizophrenic, if you will, and dramatic. How many times have I been told you're too sensitive, you're overly dramatic, you're fragile, you're, all of this kind of stuff.
All of these things.
And so when my spiritual, and by the way, for people who don't know, I was in the Air Force for 10 years.
I know. That is so funny. I just think that is like the coolest thing because like you don't present as somebody who would be military, but you're totally a veteran. Yeah. Okay.
And so that's, being an empath, an unconscious empath in the military.
That must have been really hard.
It was incredibly hard.
Painful.
Yeah. And, in hindsight, when you get enough years on you, if you've done your work, usually if this is a product of doing your work, you can look back on your life experiences and appreciate them and actually choose to not trade them in. You would choose those experiences again because they set you up perfectly to deliver the medicine, that you're here to be a carrier of.
Right.
So when my spiritual awakening began, I call it the pre-quake tremors. They started around 99, 2000.
Right.
And then
that's like childbirth pains
full
or
on,
something.
yeah, exactly. What a Braxton Hicks contractions or whatever. It's like, just kidding. We're not really having a baby yet. It's like, okay, we're not having full on, midlife crisis, dark night of the soul
actual
yet.
Awakening.
Right? That's right. The oxygen mask would have dropped and transported you out. No.
Right.
So it was early 2000s.
Yeah.
When I left the military in 2002, that's really what started all of it. And
I can't imagine going through an awakening in the military.
Yeah. I think my inner guidance was like, it's time to get out. And I was actually surprised I listened because I had long banished my heart from the decision-making table because it wasn't practical or logical.
Absolutely. It's inconvenient.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So in the process of spending time in what I call the spiritual crucible, this 5-year period where I feel like I lived 100 years, just redefining everything. What does it mean to be a woman? What do I want? What does it mean to be successful? All of that stuff. In the mix of all of that, I'm recognizing my sensitivities, some of my abilities, and I'm starting to study Buddhism. Some friends are handing me some books that, one of the first books I got was Conversations with God, and it was just every page. I knew it. Oh my God. Yes! It was like one of those, and so I was reading books and I was learning Reiki, and so that's kind of when all that congealed for me.
Right. It hit the fan. Absolutely. So it wasn't like one moment you had where you said, I think I'm an empath. It was a slow roll, but I think that's true of so many people. And then when they hear that word, empath, and pick up a book like yours, Evolutionary Empath, right? When they pick up a book like yours, and then they say, oh my God, that's me. That gives me some context for everything I've been feeling and how I've been reacting to everything. And I really credit books like yours, the work that you do with assisting with the global awakening. I think that's wonderful because that we're, and I don't know if I've ever shared with you, but my mission is total world domination of everyone waking up to the fact that they're spiritual and having a human experience. So I think,
favorite quote.
Right? Exactly. So this books like yours and the work that you do really helps with people awakening to that concept, right? So that's fantastic. Now, something that you mentioned in your book is the morphic field, and I want to make sure that I understand that. So that can you tell us about what that means?
Yes, it is. It's actually something I speak of in the introduction, but it sets the framework because all of this is happening inside of this living field of intelligence. The morphic field of the empath is a living field of intelligence. And in a morphic field, it's a theory that was first postulated by Rupert Sheldrake.
Okay.
And it basically says that there is some kind of intelligence that governs the pattern of things, the form of things. So there's a morphic field for an oak tree. There's a morphic field for a cheetah. There's a morphic field for the human race. So everything has its own kind of higher intelligence.
Yeah.
And the way I think of it, so again, going back to this 24,000-year cycle of the Great Year, as we are descending in consciousness, we're lowering in vibration. And so there's a lot of concepts, wisdom, universal truths, understandings that we have at the height of our awareness that we lose as we descend. And it's almost like this morphic field is a repository where all of this wisdom and knowledge is never lost. It's just being held in trust, waiting for us to swing back around and raise in vibration enough that we can once again access the frequency of this data.
Right.
And so the morphic field of the empath is this living field of intelligence that's been waiting for us, if you will, to come swing back around and connect with it and draw from it and know that we are supported. And at the same time, we're contributing to it. Because it's kind of like the 100th monkey effect where something gains enough critical mass. So as empaths, I've coined the phrase the empathic Big Bang. That's because that's, like in geologic time, a couple hundred years is nothing.
Right.
So in this last 150 years that empaths have been incarnating in greater numbers, we are collectively the empathic Big Bang.
Sure.
And one of the quotes I say in the book, if you watch the movie Moneyball, is the first guy through the wall always gets bloodied. And so literally, collectively, we are the first ones through the wall.
Right.
Getting bloodied, paving the way.
Wow.
Defining these concepts, standing together, arm in arm, saying that we are a real thing. We're not going away. And not only that, we're here for a reason.
Exactly.
And so part of our choice at a soul level is not just I'm going to be an empath, I'm going to be one of the first ones coming back.
Right, what Dolores Cannon refers to as the 3 waves of volunteers. Of course, the first wave coming in and just setting the stage, right? And just volunteering to do this important work. I love that. And it does feel like we get bloodied sometimes, doesn't it? Big time, especially when we feel everything.
Yes.
When you're feeling the destruction of the rainforest and the pollution of the ocean and the destruction of species. I mean, we feel that. I remember as a child, like my parents just saying, you feel the whole world. It's like they were puzzled. They didn't know what to do with me, right? So along with this morphic field, there's the shadow aspect. And again, would you just say a little bit about that too? Because I think it is important.
Yeah. So the kind of daily working definition I use for shadow is, our shadow is the disowned, unloved parts of ourselves.
Absolutely.
And so it's where we put things that we were told were wrong or not acceptable or not ladylike or men don't do that, or, whatever judgment was placed, we cleave off these parts of ourselves and we sock them down into this subconscious part of ourselves, into the shadow, where they are still alive, still and always seeking expression. And that's why I believe shadow work is such a huge, important part of doing your inner work, is because these parts of ourselves are always seeking expression, and if we keep them repressed, if we keep denying them, they're going to find a way to get out, but they're going to come out sideways, in inappropriate ways, at inappropriate times.
And probably unexpected ways and unexpected times.
Yes. And so the shadow aspect of the empath is just, when we don't know we're an empath, we're an unconscious empath. We're living unconsciously, unaware of these qualities and unaware of how that can sort of adversely affect our experiences of life. And that's just how this works. We have to be unconscious before we can be conscious, and it totally sucks. Because it sets us up for a lot of painful experiences, especially being kind of the first generation, if you will. Our parents, for the most part, our teachers, don't recognize our qualities, or they don't value them, or they think that we're just too sensitive, or, oh, you have too thin of a skin, you need to grow a thicker skin, or, whatever your story is. I know you had your parents, their favorite phrases, that they like to say. And so if you think about the 5 qualities that we have, highly sensitive nervous systems, that it's easy for us to take on everybody else's emotions and problems and feelings, and connecting in with the subtle energies of other life forms, and big hearts, and being of service, and desiring peace and harmony. Now you take those qualities and play them out when you don't know what those qualities are, when you don't know they exist. And so the shadow aspect is, shows up as codependence. Taking on everybody else's emotions and problems and thinking they're your own. Losing yourself in relationship. Not knowing where you end and the next person begins. Not, choosing not to, or being afraid to rock the boat. Or stand up for yourself. Or take a stand or advocate. It usually means we suck at saying no and drawing boundaries. We have no idea how to do that, or we're afraid. We don't know how to ask for what we need. So there's a huge list of qualities. We get overwhelmed all the time because we don't recognize that we're taking on everybody else's stuff. And so these things get compounded.
Right. That's very difficult. And so... when we get overwhelmed like that, it's really kind of hard to extricate ourselves too. Hi, this is Christy. I just want to say that we here at Radiate Wellness hope you are enjoying this podcast. It's free to you, and we hope that you find it informative and inspirational. Heck, even fun. We have just 3 small asks of you to help us radiate growth. First, please hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening on. That way, you'll receive a notification every time that we have a new podcast episode out. Next, please give us a thumbs up, a like, or a 5-star review. If you're feeling inspired, a positive review wouldn't hurt. These 2 small things will help others find us when they're searching for great podcasts. Finally, please tell your friends about the Radiate Wellness Podcast. Better yet, show them how to find us and how to subscribe. If everyone did that, we would double our audience. Thanks a lot. We really appreciate it. Now, the shadows aspect it sounds very shamanic. Do shamanic practices work expressly with that? And I'm thinking specifically of like soul retrieval. Sounds like these aspects of the shadow are something like soul fragments.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
And so and that's what the shamanic practice. And forgive me, I do not know. I know enough of shamanism to make me dangerous. So I'm asking dumb questions so our viewers don't have to. So this seems very much like soul retrieval type of work. And of course, when we get triggered, we get stuck, we kind of go back to these shadow aspects in our emotional response, et cetera, et cetera. In my practice, I see a lot of people who, in fact, I just worked with someone this morning who, if anybody has any problems in her circle, she immediately thinks that she has to fix them. Feels responsible for them. It's like, oh, I'm sorry you're having this. Well, it's theirs to have, right, first of all. And then feels like they need to fix it, feels the need to please everybody. And that's also a lack of boundaries, right? Feeling like you have to please everybody. So I know part of your book has to do with setting boundaries, like a boss. And so what do boundaries mean? I know that some people think that, well, if I'm setting a boundary, I'm keeping somebody out. But what is a good, honest definition of boundaries and how to set them?
Yeah. I haven't figured out the short definition yet.
A long definition is fine.
Okay.
That's what's great about podcasting. It takes as long as it takes.
Yes. And it's hard for me. I mean, I do it in the book just because we live in a linear world. You have to talk about something first and second and third. But to me, the conversation of your energy field and boundaries are really two sides of the same thing. And so boundaries, to have boundaries, you first have to have a sense of your own edges. You have to have a sense of where you end and the next person begins. And so sometimes in my workshops, I will bring hula hoops. And ask people to sit inside of them and use that as a visual representation of their field, of their edge. Like, this is your personal sovereign space. And you get to decide who's in it. And if they're in it without your permission, you can ask them to leave. So there's this, and it's not the same distance for everybody, but it's a good tool to use. So we have to have this understanding that we are energy beings, and that we have a field. And some people think of it as a bubble or a cocoon. I have a client that thinks of it as her hamster ball, and then she wheels around. So it's whatever works. And I also understand that we're talking finitely about something that's not exactly finite.
Right,
and
exactly.
And so I give that. I understand.
Right.
But to practice the concept, you have to think of it physically in this in the 3D we have limitations. And so when we have this sense of self, then we can start to assess the condition of our boundary, of our container, of our field.
Right.
And so one of the things I talk about is energy leaks. And it's some really cool stuff. Spirit downloaded me with some really cool concepts. Wow. And I talk about it in terms of blowout leaks and cave-in leaks. And so the terms are pretty self-explanatory. A blowout leak is when we're leaking this way. Right. Cave-in leak is when we just completely crumple and allow other people's stuff in.
So the blowout, we're maybe leaking by pushing our stuff out, and then the cave-in leak, we're taking everybody else's stuff in. Those are two very different things, right?
Yeah, so there's great discussion in the book about those. So once you get the sense of your edges, then you can start to think, oh gosh, what crumples my field? Where do I lose my boundaries? Where is it easy for me to maintain my sovereign space?
Oh, wow.
And where do I just let it get torn to shreds and look like Swiss cheese? And so there's a lot of different exercises, visualizations and such. And, there's a meditation that addresses your field to get you introduced to it and to shift the distances and to see how that feels. And
Love
kind of take a look around.
Right.
But part of it, too, is staying inside our own sovereign field. Because as empaths, a lot of times we're vacant. Like the throne is in there, but ain't nobody sitting in it.
Yeah.
Because I've gotten out and I've walked over and I've plopped myself inside of your field and dropped my anchor in you.
Right.
And so while merging and blending with other people is our superpower, and if we wield it consciously, it makes us very compassionate, very understanding, exceptional listeners, negotiators, etc., etc. When we're unconscious with it, totally codependent, totally losing ourselves in a relationship, having no idea who we are, having no sense of self. So part of the journey for so many empaths is step back inside your own boundary. Sit back down in your own throne and live your life from here.
Right. Right.
So that was a really long answer.
That's okay. That's totally okay. So that's boundaries. And then, so I know that the how we do that, how we go sit in our own throne, this is explained in the book and in the meditations. And let me just ask a practical question. I'm trying to formulate my questions here. Let me ask a practical question. When the empath is managing their energy, they're establishing their boundaries, and then there are those in their circle, in their family, in their workspace, or friends, or what have you, who do not do that and who do not respect that. What can we do?
It would be easier to answer a more specific question.
Okay.
Because there's multiple answers depending on the dynamics of what's going on. Does that make sense?
That is a complex question, isn't it? For example, we do a good job of defining and our boundaries and maintaining our energy, staying within our energy, but say perhaps a partner does always wants to unburden their emotions, anger or depression or grief, and expects us to participate in it, for example. So how can we just firmly and lovingly maintain those boundaries?
Yeah. So there's going to be several pieces to that, and it's a dimmer switch and not a flip switch. You know what I mean? It's not like you just flip a switch and it's changed. It's like degrees. It's a journey.
Sure.
You got to practice.
Right.
So establishing boundaries is a practice, just like building a muscle. If there is any room at all for dialogue, that is what I would advise. There's several things I want to say. So let me back up. I'll get to that. Let me back up to the energetic. What's going on at an energetic level. We're all energetic beings, obviously. And so especially when we're in a close relationship, we're very tuned to one another.
Right.
And so if I change something in me, if I establish a boundary or start to fortify a boundary or operate my life with a different set of values or principles, that's shifting my vibration.
Right.
Which means there are going to be some things in my life that are now in dissonance instead of resonance, disharmony instead of harmony. And so our partners are going to pick up in that change in vibration. It is human nature to want our lives and our world and the people in it to be predictable,
right,
and dependable and reliable. And so it's human nature to energetically go, oh, you left your box.
Right.
Get back in your box. I know who you are in your box. I know what you're going to say. I know how you're going to respond. I know if I do this, you're going to do that. If you're over here, I don't know what happens over here. And so a lot of times our partners, our families, our friends will react to our change, to our establishment of boundaries or whatever our change is, not even know they're doing it. Not even know why, unless they're really, really conscious and go, hang on, this isn't a normal response for me. Where is this coming from? What did this provoke in me? And trace it back. That's the minority of people. For the most part, it's just a reactionary thing. And so part of what we need to understand is when we start to change, we need to, doesn't mean we're going to excuse other people's behavior, but to at least understand that they're going to have some kind of reaction.
They are, because we're not operating along the rules, the unspoken rules we established in this relationship in the first place.
Yes. And so speaking to it, I'm a big one on communication. Speaking to it is important because
Right.
even though the other person may be like, hey, no big deal, whatever, that's cool, hey, do your thing. There is something inside of them. Is it the autonomic nervous system? Is that the animal brain? I might be saying
think
the
so.
wrong one. But the animal part of us that's always wary, that's always on alert, it's like that part of us settles down when we have an understanding.
Right.
And so if we can say to our partner, listen, the way I've been making decisions isn't working for me anymore, or the way I've been doing this isn't working for me anymore. I'm practicing doing this. Mm-hmm. Or, I say yes to way too many people and I overload my schedule and that's not working for me anymore. So you're going to hear me saying no more often. Or if it's something directly related to the partner, honey, I love you and... Mm-hmm. This is a dynamic that's been present in the past with us, and I find that I just can't tolerate it anymore, or it crushes me. It doesn't, whatever your truth is.
Right.
And so what's difficult, so this is an example of asking for what you need. Mm-hmm. What's challenging with that is it's our responsibility to ask for what we need, mm-hmm. and it's nobody's responsibility to comply. And so that's where, when you have the dynamic of another person, how you present it, to get clear about, because you can't just come in and say, you're pissing me off, you're dumping on me, leave the room, shut up, go to, whatever.
I can't take it anymore.
Right. Because that becomes accusatory.
Right.
And the person's automatically going to become defensive. Mm-hmm. And so, I could go on and on about all the nuances of these different kinds of dynamics. Speaking about it is going to be important.
Right.
And making some new choices. There are times, especially if I'm really feeling vulnerable or sensitive or open, and maybe my husband comes home from work and he's, I can sense the tension or whatever he's dealt with in that day, and he's wanting to talk about it and kind of offload. And there are times when I just have to say, I'm feeling really sensitive right now, and I'm really affected by the energies that you're carrying. Mm-hmm. Can we talk about this later? Or I want to hear what you have to say, but right now I need to leave the room and go tend to my energy field, whatever.
Sure.
So those are skills that I had to learn.
And those are definitely skills, because we fall into our patterns, don't we? Mm-hmm. Of how we were raised, about how our parents reacted, how they spoke to each other, and so we have to retrain ourselves, don't we? How does your husband respond to all of this? Does he get it?
He is a sweetheart. He's a muggle. I've described him as a closet empath.
Oh, that's so
because he's actually very sensitive. But, my life, I love deconstructing spiritual and psychological stuff, and talking about it.
Let's do this.
Yeah, and his what floats his boat is different, but yet we're incredibly compatible. So gratefully, he's very loving, he's very understanding. And I also have to watch, when you're a teacher, when you're a person that coaches others, to be careful about that line of becoming my husband's coach or being a nagging wife, so if there's something that I feel like I need to bring to his attention in his behavior or how he's handling something, or something that's maybe not a healthy habit,
right,
I'm going to present it that way, as opposed to, I really try to manage my reactions too, because there are times that I get triggered and I'm like, okay, we're just humans here, nothing's wrong. So this, don't make more out of this than what it is, but yeah.
Right, absolutely.
So I have to work on my processes too.
Yeah, that's an important distinction. And speaking of relationships, I think that when people start doing this type of work and awakening to their status or their quality of being an empath, it can be uncomfortable in relationships. And I know a lot of people where their relationships just kind of regulated, self-defined, and they lost some friends along the way, lost some people in their families or their circle along the way, because there are some that just can't deal with someone changing,
Right.
with someone being more honest and establishing boundaries, right? So that's kind of a difficult part of being an empath too, right? So it's not all, it's far from all being rosy and sunshine and rainbows, etc.
and that can be said for the entire human existence as well.
Well, this is so true, but it's so worth it. Well, is there anything about the book that you think is important to mention that maybe I didn't know to ask or we haven't touched upon yet? Because I think it's an important book.
Thank you. Well, just rolling off of the conversation that we just had, the unspoken subtitle to this book is Life Skills for an Evolving Species.
Yes.
And at one point that was, when the publisher accepts your work, they want your suggestions for the title and the subtitle, and that was actually a potential actual subtitle.
Right.
Now it's the energetic subtitle. But whether you identify as an empath or not, everything that I talk about in this book are good human existence skills. Drawing boundaries, learning to say no, asking for what you need, managing your energy field, learning to be more embodied. There's a whole exploration of the masculine and feminine energies and healthy expressions of them and unhealthy expressions of them. And communication, just examples of things. Like when my spiritual awakening began, I was so grateful for the models I had of showing me different ways, not just teaching or talking about it, but actually observing how are they handling that. She just said that to him. That is so cool. I never would have thought. I never knew I could say that. Just pulling all of those things into my toolbox. And so I offer, and for some people it may be rudimentary, like, I know that stuff. But but it's helpful, especially with a lot of clients and students I've worked with, to give them new languaging.
Yes.
For something, how to handle a thing, how to present a thing.
Yes. I think that is very, very useful. So yes, having models. One of my teachers, Tina Zion, has sections in her book where it's like, this is how a conversation would go with a typical client. Imagine yourself in the place of the healer, and this is what you might say. And so just having a model, it's like, I'm not finding my own words. Let me have a model for how that could sound. I think that's very practical. And that's what I love about your work that you're doing. It's practical. And then you have a workshop coming up.
I do.
Tell me about the workshop.
Yes. So I mentioned that I've offered empath workshops for a number of years. So when I sat down to write the book, I put the workshops on hold, took all of that data, folded into the book, downloaded a bunch of new information, got the book written, and then it was time to completely revamp the workshop content.
Of course.
So I actually debuted it earlier this year. So it's not its inaugural,
Right. It's not the
timing,
main voyage.
Right. But it's based on the new content. It's in Kansas City at the Hollis Center. It's December 6th through 8th.
Right.
It's 2.5 days. So we start at, I think it's 2 o'clock on a Friday. Finish up on Sunday. I think it's something like 5. Don't go to my website for the exact times, but basically it's 2.5 days.
Right.
And it's an intimate dive into this content. We're going to do a lot of experiential stuff so that people can once again go into their own energy field, experience things for themselves so that they can create their own guideposts, their own markers, their own ways of recognizing when they've crossed a line or haven't, and checking in with their field and having all of these cool conversations. So,
that sounds really good. So again, December 6th through 8th, that is 2019. This episode will drop November 19. So you've got time to sign up. And you've got the information on your website, which is
bluestartemple.org. There are early bird registration discounts if you register with a friend. So 2 of you at the same time, you get even more of a discount. So
wonderful. And we'll put the link in the show notes. Blue Star Temple, I just have to ask real quick, what does that refer to? Because I haven't heard you talk about blue or a star or a temple so far. Right?
Okay, how much time do we have? Because that's actually
is that a whole story?
There is a whole story around it. The name, let me back up and say this. A couple of years ago, I was really petitioning the universe, like, okay, I do this divine feminine work, and I do this work with embodiment and shamanism and empaths and all, and like, what's the umbrella? How do all of these things fit? What am I supposed to do? You know, like just one of those moments, like, come on, what is the bigger vision? And I'm falling asleep one night, and I am startled awake with Blue Star University.
Nice.
And
Okay.
I was like, oh my God, yes, Blue Star University, yes. How do I do that? What is that? You know, so immediately I'm like, oh my God, is this supposed to be brick and mortar? You know, so all of that
right.
business. I'm like, chill, cloths. Okay. And then not long after that, I get the vision that Blue Star Temple is the first step. So I don't even know what Blue Star University is yet. I am working towards it. But Blue Star Temple right now is a virtual space. And the blue star refers to my very strong connection to the star Sirius.
Oh, yes.
I believe very much in our star relatives and communing with our star relatives and their influence on our planet and our evolution as a species. But I was also shown that blue star refers to Venus, so it pulls in the imagery of Venus as well as a blue planet and the feminine work that I'm doing, and the Earth as a blue planet. So there's multiple layers of meaning in Blue Star Temple.
Love it, love it, love it. Okay, so bluestartemple.org. All right, we'll put that in the show notes. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining me today. And again, the book is The Evolutionary Empath, A Practical Guide for Heart-Centered Consciousness by Stephanie Redfeather, PhD. And this is also available on your website?
Yes, you can go to my website, and then there's links there to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Inner Traditions, and wherever your favorite places to purchase a book.
Wherever fine books are sold.
Yes, exactly. There's a Kindle edition available, and the audiobook should be dropping in January.
Do you narrate the audiobook?
I do.
Of course you do. You've got such a beautiful voice for it, too.
You can't quite hear it all right now. It's a little Wolfman Jack, but
sexy Kathleen Turner. And this is going to be fun. So wonderful. I'm excited for your book and excited for the possibilities. You've got a ton of interviews coming up, like 30 or some sort of insane number of interviews coming up. And I'm just tickled that you would come and interview with me. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Stephanie. All right.
Radiate Wellness is a community of holistic and alternative healers and consultants based in the Kansas City area, dedicated to helping you create spiritual, energetic, and physical well-being. To learn more about our practitioners, services, classes, and events, or to schedule an appointment, visit us at radiatewellnesscommunity.com.